Season 2, Episode 11, Michal Grzeskowiak, Find and Maintain Motivation.
This is the Actual Fluency Podcast, helping you become a better language learner by providing motivating weekly inspiration, as well as top tips and tricks from expert guests. And now, your host, Chris Broholm.
All right, everyone, we're back with another episode of the Actual Fluency Podcast. And this week I can't do an introduction because I'm on my way to Budapest to do the Polyglot workshop, and then I'll be relocating to Berlin. So there's a lot of things going on, but obviously the podcast must go on as well. So today I'm really excited to be joined by Michal Grzeskowiak.
Yeah,
am I close?
Not bad. You're close enough. Yeah.
Cool. Me and Michal agreed that I didn't get any help with his name before the recording, so we could see a sort of genuine attempt of pronouncing a nice Polish name.
Yeah, it's always a challenge.
So, Michal, how are you doing, man?
For most people, really good. I'm really good. Very busy time recently. I just came back from Warsaw yesterday. I was giving a talk on language learning at the university.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Cool. And today, of course, we're talking to you in your sort of hobby, or what can you call it, a life's ambition of looking into how can we improve ourselves, motivation, life improvement, life coaching. And we're trying to give people that little extra boost they need in their language learning. And as we discussed before the recording, indeed in every aspect of life, to
Absolutely.
just perform that little better.
We all need it, and we all have similar struggles when it comes to motivation, and especially consistency. Doing something for a long time is our struggle. It's super easy for most of us to procrastinate, to put things off, and even to give up very quickly if we don't have like very strong fundamentals of why we do something, and then if we don't organize this journey in the right way, in the right supportive way. So let's focus on that today.
Yeah, perfect. But before we do that, why don't you give people a little introduction to yourself? How did you get to where you are today in a Cliff Note version?
Okay. Like really short?
Yeah, take a few minutes.
Okay. So I finished the law school, but when I was in my fourth year at the university, I went for the exchange year to Germany. And it was a transformational year for me, because I had like a mini world in one place, people from, like, say, 15 countries. And I was hearing all of these languages around me. And I said to myself, when we were finishing our theater show, which was part of the university course, and we did our play called Now or Never in German. Mm-hmm. And at the end of that show, the students from 11 countries said now or never in 11 different languages. And I remember after that show, I was speaking with our tutor, and she told me, "You cannot be a lawyer." And I said, I know, you're right. Because, and I think it was that moment when I decided I have to do something that I'm passionate about, something with, I say shining eyes, which is a very good metaphor for a life with passion. Mm-hmm. But I didn't know what to do. I had no idea what to do. So the only skills I would say I had at that time was English and German. So I started teaching, started giving private classes, basically, the easiest possible form for a beginner. But I also started getting interest in personal growth, reading many books, attending first seminars, and got interest in coaching, in training. And I started introducing into my work with people the elements of coaching, of working also not on the language itself, but on motivation, on the mindset, on getting to know yourself better. These elements that, in my opinion, turn out to be very often more important than the technical stuff itself. Mm-hmm. And I like saying that the skill set without the mindset will only leave you upset. Yeah, very, very often we focus too much on the skill set. And I think the mindset should be always in the first place. And I think we can talk about this today because this is where motivation and consistency comes from. And it's very rarely about the skills, about the how, but mindset should come in the first place.
Right, and that's super interesting because when I see new people come to the polyglot community and they say like, "Oh, I love what you guys are doing. I want to learn languages too," and they ask like, "What's the best method?"
Mm-hmm.
Right, so they're asking for the how, basically. They're saying, is it Michel Thomas or is it the Essie meal or is it teach yourself? Whereas it's probably better to look at the motivational aspect and the how we can actually apply ourselves in that situation.
Yeah, this is very common. And then I remember we were doing the polyglot workshops with Alex Rollins and Richard Simcott a few months ago. And one of them mentioned that we all have these dusty books on our shelves because, and they are constant reminders of our failure. because this is exactly what happens because we focus on this, what is the best method, what is the best language book, and we just buy the book without even thinking if we can keep the learning process. And yeah.
Right. So maybe that's why we should start today's episode is talking about how you can get properly started with something, be it French or I don't know, learning how to cook or something, a new skill or a new hobby basically that you want to excel at. How can we start that at the best possible foot? What's the mindset changes or maybe mindset attitudes we need going into it?
So very typical, like very common for most people, is that they just get excited about something that, for example, sounds good, it looks really attractive or is in fashion. And so we jump into something, I don't know, start going to the gym, doing some fitness, language learning, anything, without any kind of reflection if this is our decision, if this is something that we really want, and without any reflection, why?
Mm-hmm.
We just do it because there is the mood to do it, there is a positive emotion at the moment, so we say, okay, I go for it. We get really excited and the excitement is really high, but from pure logic, we can say that if the excitement, if this emotional high is really high, it's gonna fall down very, very quickly.
All right.
Because you just cannot function like that all the time.
It's so like the new things, right? New things are always exciting, whether it's a new job or even a new girlfriend sometimes, can be very exciting.
Oh, absolutely.
And then when things they stagnate, that's when the challenges begin.
And it's it's actually kind of normal because we get used to things, so we cannot be excited all the time. But what I'm pointing here is we don't build any real reason to start. This is very often this is just a superficial reason.
Right.
I can tell you a story because in Berlin we got the vouchers for teach yourself courses. And now so we can order one for free, basically, in the price of a conference ticket. and I started thinking like, what language do I want to learn next? And I was, circling the possibilities like Japanese, Hindi. I was looking for them, and then I realized, well, I know what's going to happen. I will order Japanese, teach yourself. I will go through 3-4 lessons. I will put it on my shelf and it will be a dust collector.
Right.
Because I don't have any reason to study Japanese at the moment. So I already know from my previous experiences, because I failed many times as well. I mean, right now I have this attitude that I have to know my why first. But in the previous years, I was making the same mistakes over and over again.
Right.
So I'm not ordering anything. I'm gonna give this voucher to somebody else who needs a language course, because I don't want to have a list of languages, to collection of languages, just for my ego.
Right.
Like I want to get to 10 languages and I want to learn Japanese because it sounds good. It just doesn't work.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't work. So I encourage everybody I work with, and I was encouraging those 300 students 2 days ago in Warsaw, to starting with why that is personal, to find for all the good reasons that you can not only think of, but really feel. The reasons that will resonate with you.
Right.
And there are 4 basic categories of these reasons.
Mm-hmm.
First is the most typical for this language community, because we are mostly language enthusiasts. So it's enjoyment and just this natural curiosity. When you analyze most people who speak, let's say, more than 10 languages, they don't do it for money anymore, because we don't have professions using more than 10 languages normally. And so it's basically enjoyment, just out of curiosity. So that's the first big reason. The second is can be culture. We get very interested in the culture, and language is a big part of it, and it lets us understand the culture and get to know all the aspects of it. The third one is professional. So when someone needs to go to work, wants to work in an international company, for example, a very big reason. And the fourth one is probably the strongest, personal, especially falling in love with a foreigner. Has been so far the strongest reason I found.
Yeah.
This is what happened to my Spanish 5 years ago, and I say relationship is gone, but my love for Spanish language is still here.
Yeah.
And yeah, like people start surprising themselves with how much they can learn and how fast when they fall in love.
Right.
So why don't use this falling in love metaphor for other aspects too? Like, you don't have to fall in love with a person, but fall in love with, let's say, some aspect of the language or some aspect of the culture of a place. It will work miracles too.
Right. That's cool. I was thinking about one thing you said about the people don't have the why necessarily when they start out, or at least a good one. Do you think that some people just inherently want to learn languages for the sake of learning languages? It might not be a completely egotistical approach, but they see other people speaking a lot of languages and they're like, oh, that could be cool and fun. And that's not a very strong why, but can you then figure out a strong why, that way, if you understand what I'm saying? Or are they kind of doomed from the beginning if they don't have any strong whys?
Well, it can be a strong why when you just enjoy the process of learning, and you are so passionate and curious about it that even studying, I don't know, the structure of the language and the sound of pronunciation, although you're not going to use it professionally, you don't have many outside reasons. We also have these inner rewards in ourselves.
Right.
And
but it's a harder way either way. It's a harder way of doing it because you don't really have any, I guess, anchors or something like that. I mean, you have some emotion maybe, but it's a relatively superficial reason. And is that why people give up usually? Is that because they don't have enough motivation?
Yeah, when those reasons are not grounded in them, but are superficial, and it's okay that we give up, but we should learn from this.
Right.
That when we start something and we give up very quickly, or we procrastinate all the time, we should just draw a lesson from it. Like, maybe I don't have a strong why at the moment.
Right. And can we then find one?
Yeah, find one or create one, and then you put yourself in a position that you will have to learn it. For example,
Right.
one girl at the workshop asked me, like she said, I can motivate other people. It's not a problem because she's also a teacher, but I cannot sustain my motivation for, I don't know, Russian or Italian. And I told her, not having the skill doesn't hurt you enough.
Right.
And she said, well, yeah, you're right. Like, not having this skill at the moment is not a problem for her.
Right. It doesn't change your life, so
So yeah, it's also a component of motivation. This sort of pain of not having it.
right. Like if you're in the country, for instance, and every day you're reminded how useless you are at Russian or whatever, then that's a pain point that can be a powerful motivation if you're trying to learn Russian or whatever language.
And also English native speakers in the US, in the UK, usually don't speak foreign languages, just
Oops. Seem to have lost the internet connection just temporarily. So I'm just trying to get the call back. Michal, can you hear me? I'm just going to take this little technical problem as an opportunity to play a message from our sponsor, the Mellow Method.
Mellow Method is the learning revolution since 1995. Now you can make your dream of living your passion for languages real. Do you want a method that really teaches you a language? What if you could have your own school and get success teaching your students perfect lessons, 100% focused on conversation? Even if you have no experience, Mellow Method will work where other methods can't. With Mellow Method, you will overcome the speaking barrier from Lesson 1. Jimmy Mello, the Brazilian polyglot, has created the best method to teach any foreign language. It's now available in 11 languages from English to Spanish and Brazilian Portuguese, including Mandarin and Polish. Be a polyglot with Mellow Method. Access right now www.mellowmethod.com and reach your goals with Mellow Method, the best method ever created to teach and learn any language.
What was the last thing we were talking about? Was it pain?
yeah, as one of the components of motivation. If not having something doesn't hurt us enough, we don't have so much inner strength to go for it.
Is that related to weight loss by any chance? Because I'm quite overweight, and I've been struggling with that for the years. But one of the reasons I think that I haven't really, at the end of the day, it's not rocket science how to do it, kind of like languages. But I think one of the reasons that I haven't done a real go at it is because my life is sort of fine. It doesn't hurt enough. I'm not 400 kilos. I can still travel around. I'm quite mobile. It doesn't hurt when I walk upstairs. Can that be a sort of a tangent to that? What you're saying? There's not enough pain or discomfort or
Yeah, very very good analogy. Since it doesn't hurt you. You're still cool with that. You're okay with that.
right.
When you start, for example, not being able to walk the stairs, that would be the point when you realize, oh, something is wrong here.
Right.
And maybe that would be like the trampoline to really start doing something with that.
Yeah. That's the next project.
Yeah.
So we've tried to give people some tips for starting out. What are your positions on the traditional goal setting? Are you into the SMART goals or do you have any other sort of, like, how should people set goals when they start out? And is it even important to set goals when you start out with a language learning project?
Well, being very specific always helps. Is as long as it's not pushing any pressure on us. But having a clear vision of what you want to learn is also a key to staying motivated, because you're not wasting your time and your energy when you have a clear focus. So first, we were talking about this why, these 4 different types of reasons. But then we should also define of what exactly is it that we want to learn based on that why. So for example, when it comes to a language, any language, I want to learn a language is just so unclear that we can also get stuck in our motivation because we don't know what to do exactly. We don't know what to focus on.
Oh, right, yeah.
So we will be making mistakes of wasting our time and energy and getting frustrated. So definitely, we look at the language, what level do I want to be in? And then there is some space for coaching questions like, how will you know you have this level? How will you recognize you have this level? What will you be able to express? How much of how many percent of the text will you be able to understand? So being very specific always helps.
Right. That's really cool, and those would be questions that you could ask yourself when you're deciding on a project, and thereby maybe write in a journal or write it in your, I don't know, blog or calendar, whatever, and you could sort of revise those very specific questions as you're going along to continually boost the motivation, so you never lose track of why you started in the first place.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. And sometimes we want to be like really too ambitious, and we start with a language saying, I want to have the C2 level, C2, when in fact we don't have a chance to use it on a daily basis, and we have no idea how much time and effort it takes to go to C2.
Right.
So also be realistic. So yeah, these smart or smarter methods are cool. They are very good to specify what we want to achieve.
Right. So set specific goals and try to define exactly what it is you want to achieve when you start out with a language project.
Yeah, it takes a lot of pressure away too. When, for example, from the very beginning, I say, I want to be communicative in Italian, so B1 is totally enough for me.
Right.
Okay, no pressure about that.
Because you're not trying to get to the mountain that is C2.
Exactly.
So you feel like you're not quite as stressed, and people don't work well under stress, so you have a better kind of working flow, and in that way, when you'll get to B1 in a more, I guess, stress-free and more free-flowing way. But what can people do? Now we talked about how people can get started really well, and I think a lot of people have these ideas about getting started, and I guess it's part of this excitement phase as well. That you set goals. It's like when you want to start running, you go out and buy all the gear, you read all the guides, you get all the apps. You prepare yourself in quite a good way, and then, as you say, there's a point where you almost tank, and then you just give up, and then all the running equipment is in your cupboard, and you never take it out again. So what can people do when they feel like that? Maybe not when they're in the hole, but they can see the hole or wall approaching. They're like getting a little bit frustrated, maybe with lack of progress, or I don't know what. There are lots of ways people could get frustrated along the way. But what can you do when you're on your way and you feel a problem coming?
I would say in the very beginning, lower your expectations, but in a good way. Not that you give up, but don't expect. For example, don't expect your progress to be constant and like straight line going up. Don't expect that you're gonna have lots of energy and excitement all the time. Just be realistic about it. Just look that we have seasons in the year. We human beings also have seasons when we have more energy, less energy. So lower your insanely high expectations that you have that learning process will be a straight line going right up, because we may see a big progress in the beginning when we have some focused work, but any learning curve, any learning process is built on the periods of plateau, for example.
Right. Where you
And
don't
if you
feel any.
Yeah, for some time you study, you practice, but you don't see any progress, any sort of progress for weeks sometimes,
Right.
sometimes for months. You don't realize you're not growing. But if you're prepared for that consciously, because you were not expecting progress all the time, and you know that plateau is a progress actually, but in a long-term perspective, plateau is necessary for you.
Right.
Then that pressure is off. So you can go on, you can continue knowing that it's taking you to the right place.
Right. And I'd say that also plateaus are quite overrated, because even when it feels like you're not learning anything and it feels like you're not improving, there is a long-term cognitive improvement going on anyway. Just because you don't feel like you're better in an italki lesson a week after the other one, even though you studied all week, doesn't mean that there's something hasn't happened in your Russian or German or whatever knowledge in the long-term memory or in your brain. It can just feel that way sometimes, like you're completely stagnated. But every time I felt that way, I've always come back later with even more. So, like, that would be my little insight there, that plateaus are not really plateaus. They're not, definitely not failures if you don't improve in a week or a month or whatever period of time you choose.
Yeah, I totally relate to that. And I was reading some advice for how to write, because I also like writing. I blog articles. And there is a blogger called James Clear. And he found this advice of great writers of how to write really well. And the advice is, be ready to create a lot of crap.
Right.
Because even if you write a bad article, so that can be a reference to our plateau. So theoretically, you're not making progress. Like, let's say, suddenly you're writing the article that is worse quality than the previous one. You're still improving. You're still learning. Because you're still practicing.
Right.
Even at that moment, it doesn't seem like that. So be ready to create a lot of crap. So also be ready to give up the idea of seeing progress every week, especially in after a few months when you had that big progress, but it's not already like the beginning phase.
Right. And analogy to language learning is, don't be afraid of making mistakes, because mistakes perfect your language, they improve it. And without mistakes, it's really, really hard to speak. Like, if you're scared of making mistakes, it's really hard to start speaking in your target language.
Yeah. I don't make mistakes. I do mistakes.
Right. Yeah, it's a great thing. And like, I think I've talked about this before on the podcast, but I was so afraid of making mistakes that I would just think out a sentence in my head, and then I would type it into Google Translate. And I know that's not a perfect method, but if it gave me the no suggestions, then I would send it. And it's of course completely mad, and it meant that I only said things that I was somewhat sure about. But that's not how you grow. I mean, particularly not when you're with a tutor who can tell you
That's not how you grow fast.
right. That's like that. It would have taken me 10 years to start speaking then in Russian, because it's such a hard language for me. That I don't know how the change happened. I guess I just heard it enough times, make mistakes, that one tutoring session I was just like, fuck it. I'm just gonna say whatever I think is right, and not hesitate too much. Because I think one of the things that I heard is, like, when you hesitate, you're more likely to make mistakes than if you just say whatever comes to your mind. I don't know if that's a bit of a myth, but yeah, I'd say make lots of mistakes when possible, or do mistakes like Michal says, like, do it consciously.
It's true that when we start overthinking, like analyzing, hesitating, the tendency that we make more mistakes. So it doesn't help this constant overthinking, preparing everything in our heads.
Right.
And it also takes away the pleasure of using the language from us.
Yeah.
So we should be really careful about that, because this is what happens very often at schools, unfortunately, in traditional courses, focusing on what tense should I use? Is it correct? Are they going to laugh at me if I say this? So also a big part of working on effective language acquisition is letting go of all of this unnecessary pressure.
Right. It's all in our heads.
Yeah, it is. It is. And it's all learned, so it can be unlearned.
Yeah. Yeah, it's always good to do. And what do you think about, is it a good thing to follow a lot of the super successful hyper polyglots when you start out, or is it like, does it have diminishing effects or detrimental effects to look at someone speak like 20 languages effortlessly?
They can inspire us, but we should also remember that they have different routines now than they had in the beginning, at the beginning of the journey.
Right.
So sometimes, let's call this modeling the giants. Sometimes it doesn't work because they are in a completely different place today.
Right.
But as a source of inspiration, they are amazing. They are beautiful.
It's just a great way to get motivated, but it's also dangerous to, particularly the question of, methods, or maybe not method, but more like a routine, because they've taken so many steps, both, I said mostly mental steps, but they've made so many realizations. They learned so many lessons about themselves, about learning, about language, that when they give you their method or lesson and you try it, it's not going to be as successful. Even I don't know if it's even going to be successful at all, period. But, it's going to be hard for you to apply what they've spent maybe 10, 15, 20 years getting to mentally.
Absolutely. That's the risk of, trying to let's say emulate someone who is really advanced at something, but still the inspiration and the element of supporting environment as well.
Right.
Because
that's the polyglot community, like the gathering, the conference, the Facebook
and
groups.
it's very common, because most people I asked in Berlin, let's say, some of them go there for knowledge. But most of them were saying, I'm here to hang out with people who are at the same, let's say, energy level, the same passion. And just spending time in this environment that is totally supportive is the biggest advantage, is the biggest power. And this is also the element supporting us in any long-term, long-run activity like language learning. Right. So moving now to this consistency and long-term endurance, environment should be one of the basic elements we should remember about. Is our environment supporting us? Because look at the difference. If you, let's say you have flatmates, and none of them speaks a foreign language, none of them studies, none of them is interested in the language. How motivated, energized do you feel to keep your journey of becoming a polyglot or hyper polyglot? And now the second scenario, you share a flat only with polyglots from different countries. So that every day, let's say you go to the kitchen, you speak Portuguese in the kitchen. You cook together, you speak in Italian. And you see them progressing, and you see them, singing songs in Chinese. How does that affect your language learning activity? Well, a lot.
That's
Yeah.
huge. 'Cause you're breathing it in, and you're like, that's the lifestyle you're living in, and yeah, we should start like a polyglot. What do you call it? Flatmate search society.
Yeah.
Can rent like big houses in multicultural cities and move people in for like 6 months at a time. That would be good fun. So, are there any other things that people can do to stay consistent? Because I know that a lot of people set goals. They say like, I'm going to study for 30 minutes 4 times a week, and they might do that for the first 2-3 weeks, and then they sort of fall out of it, and they start studying sort of randomly and sporadically.
Yeah.
So how can you stay on track with your goals at all times and avoid, because assuming people have been realistic with the goals to start out with, how can we stick to yeah, I guess stick to it. How do we stick to what we've set out to do?
Well, first of all, we have a tendency to start very big, and we want to overload ourselves, because we say, of course I can study 2 hours a day.
Right.
I had one client who said, starting tomorrow, I'm gonna study 5 hours a day. I said, no, you're not. He said, no, I'll be studying 5 hours a day. After 1 week, he's coming back to me. You were right. And it's very common for us that we want to start really big just to show ourselves, yeah, of course we can. But what is much more effective in the long run is to start really, really small. Start from 5 minutes, 10 minutes, a few sentences, but just focus on consistency first. Just create the habit of consistency. And most people give up after these 2-3 weeks because the habit has not been created. And habits are the key elements of consistency, because if we don't have them, our actions depend on our willpower. And the willpower, being like a muscle, is limited. It's limited. When you exercise at the gym and you train one muscle, there is a point of so-called failure of the muscle. You cannot move it. It cannot stress anymore at that moment.
Right.
So it's limited amount of power. And it's the same with our willpower. If we want to study new language and we use our willpower to that, at some point, let's say we are tired, we are stressed out, someone visited us, distracted us, it's gone. We just don't have more willpower to study a language that day. And the chain is broken, and it's just gone. So instead of that, just focus on creating the habit, which is automatic, so that you don't even have to think about it, don't have to remember about it, and don't have to be motivated to do it. The habit is something that doesn't depend on your mood. It only depends on the reminder, the activator that happens. So starting really small, focusing on consistency and creating habits.
Right, so your first habit could be, I'm gonna every day after my morning coffee open the SML book. Could that be the first day of starting to build a habit?
Yes, so you have the morning coffee, which is activator, which is the reminder of the habit. You have immediate association. Okay, morning coffee, asimil. Morning coffee, asimil. And what is also the third element of the habit is the reward, which is essential, especially in the beginning, just to show yourself that you've done a good job. So you can give yourself a tap in the back saying, good job, Chris, after having that one lesson of asimil with your morning coffee. What science shows, with time, we don't need external rewards, but just a feeling of satisfaction is enough.
Right. And you'll definitely get that from studying most textbooks. Anyway.
Yeah.
It's when you finish a chapter or something.
You definitely get it. In the beginning, we should strengthen that with some form of reward. that is pleasant, relaxing, and has no side effects. Very important. Because if you have a lesson of Assimil and then you have 3 bars of chocolate as a reward,
right,
you will surely create a habit, but
you also grow a stomach,
yeah.
you know. So that's a bad idea.
So that's
I guess that's go.
So that's basically the structure of every habit we have, and we have hundreds of very small habits every day. Lacing your shoes, all these little things that we have. Brushing your teeth with right hand or left hand. It's always the same. It's automatic.
It's totally automatic.
Yeah.
It's autopilot mode.
So I would sit down and brainstorm what habits can you create to support your language learning. I have this habit of when I leave my flat, I immediately put my headphones and I just click, because I have these headphones with a click from the iPhone, and the audiobook in a foreign language is already there. So it happens like automatically now. I don't have to remember about it. Always have these headphones. It's just having the input, the listening practice is just one click away.
Right. And you've done it for so many times that you just automatically do it.
I prepared that strategically, so I spend, let's say, half an hour on collecting the audiobooks I want to have, that I'm interested in, and I can listen to many times because I like what they say, and I like also the voice, so it's pleasant. And it just happens now.
Cool. And that's what we should try and do with our language learning habits, is to make them from the beginning realistic, and give the activator, like you say, like could be the coffee, it could be the when you come home, I suppose. Or
activator is something that you do every day without fail, or something that happens to you every day without fail.
Right. And then you make sure to have a realistic task, and you can build on that later, of course. But the habit itself, once you've finished it, you give yourself some kind of reward, like I did it.
Yes. Realistic task, really small in the beginning, just to create consistency.
Right, because you can always grow that. I mean, when I was talking to Benny a few weeks ago, and we were talking about how to do language learning at the sort of basic level if you were not feeling like getting out of bed, or you're sick or depressed or whatever. And he said, well, if you just set the task of opening the textbook, that's your goal. I mean, you'd be you'd be pretty bad off if you don't just take at least a few pages in. And then the next time you do it, you might read a chapter, and then you might do that for a long time, and then suddenly, hey, I feel like doing 2 today, you know? But the routine is the one we're talking about here, is more important than what you do in the routine, sort of, as long as you do it every day, or whatever, every other day could be as well. I think every day is good, but I can understand for some people, if you have a family or 2 jobs and stuff, might be stressful. But that's really awesome, and it's some things that when I look back at my language in the last year and a half, could definitely have benefited a bit from some routine creation and more, I guess a stronger why as well, like we talked about in the beginning. It's something that I might also have spend a little time in the beginning. It's like an investment of time for the whole experience to be better. I think that's a good idea. So it's one of my favorite topics as well, this motivation and self-improvement, and how we can be better versions of ourselves every day. And it's amazing how these things that we talked about today applies to everything, like from fitness to careers to even relationships, health, even if you play golf, I'm sure that you can take away some of these things on how to work on your game, or how to have a better, maybe go into the game with a stronger why. And do you want to be the next Tiger Woods, or do you just want to be the best in your local club? Yeah, and I think it's a great topic.
Yeah, not just specific skills, but life in general and the quality of your life.
Right.
Mastering
That,
consistency and working on yeah on this aspect will affect like many zones.
right. And that's what we're trying to do here with the encouragement is to give better conditions for people to create that consistency that gives the results. Because you can learn a language in almost no time if you can master the art of consistency,
Hmm.
right? That's awesome. You know, Michal, we could, like I said, I love this topic. Could talk about this for hours, but I have a plane to catch. Need to get to Budapest, and we unfortunately need to close for this episode. But I just want to thank you for coming on and providing so many hands-on tips. You know, I literally took like a page of notes here, and I hope that people at home did the same because it's rare that we get sort of. I mean, you can really tell that you're into also coaching because you did a great coaching session here, sort of a general one for that applies to many people. And I hope that people out there enjoyed it as well. And if they have, any questions on the matter, I'm sure that you'd be happy to jump in and answer
Absolutely.
on the thread. So thank you so much, and I look forward to seeing you somewhere in the world. Maybe I'd love to come to Poland one day. It's been on my list for a
Come
while.
by. Well, actually, my city, Poznan, is some form of capital of polyglots because many of them have come already, and I'm just lucky to live in this
Yeah,
place.
I'd love to. Are you going to do another workshop or meetup or something?
Definitely, definitely. The community is
Cool.
growing, and people want to connect more. So,
Right. Awesome. Well, I'll be looking out for that, and in the meantime, I'll be in Budapest and having fun.
enjoy
So,
Budapest.
yeah.
Thank you for listening to the Actual Fluency Podcast. If you would like to get more out of the podcast, check out the VIP Club by going to actualfluency.com/VIP.